just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone, joined by Ryan Roberts and Alex Gilstrap. Today, we are continuing on with our positional preview shows, wrapping up the tight end group. We did multiple pairings for this tight end group, and if you missed any of them, go back and check those out. Today is the overview, as I said, talking about guys that we're a little bit too high on, a little bit too maybe lower on than the consensus, covering some names that maybe we didn't mention early on in the week, although the list of guys that we have today is pretty much most of the guys that we've already talked about, but we're going to share a little bit more insight on those players. Specifically talking about this class, though, guys, the one theme I feel like Ryan and I have this week is that it's a class based on projection. It is a group that has a lot of upside, except for Michael Mayer. After Michael Mayer, it's a lot of like, let's see what this guy can do. And there's going to be a lot of hits and misses after summer scouting's done, going into the actual start of the cycle in January.
Y'all think there's a lot of upside in this class? I mean, I know we have Eric Gilbert, who is a name that until he's on the football field again, I'm not really including in any tight end rankings or anything like that, who's obviously at Georgia from LSU, top recruit. I mean, there's really only like two or three guys outside of Michael Mayer who I see that could potentially be top 100 guys.
Let me rephrase. Upside was the
friendly,
a little bit generous.
You can use upside. I mean, Alex, I'm looking at guys like this, right?
Okay.
We talked about Michael Mayer as the potential elite player. I think he was number 7 on Mel Kiper's initial big board or whatever.
Yeah,
he's
awesome.
he's a dude. You mentioned Eric Gilbert, who could be that guy. We'll see. He's a projection, certainly. But then I think you have guys like Cameron Latu from Alabama who could take a big rise now. I think Josh Wiley from Cincinnati is a guy to keep an eye on. Jahim Bell from South Carolina. I think if Jahleel Billingsley gets back in good graces with Sark at Texas, he could be a dude. I actually like, we haven't talked about him at all this week, but Benjamin Urisak from Stanford, I think is a big sleeper in the class. So yeah, I think there's a few guys after Michael Mayer. There's one that I think could potentially be an elite player in Eric Gilbert if he hits his upside. And then I think there's a bunch of good players. Here's a take, I guess. I prefer this tight end class much more than I do last year.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes.
Much more.
That's not a hot take. Well, but
it's not even just Mayer either. It's just the depth, I think, has more projection to it.
And what I was more so getting at, Alex, I totally agree with what you're saying. What I more so was getting at is that there's going to be a lot of misses in the group. There's just more opportunities, I think, for these players to outperform those expectations. There's guys that could step up and end up being quality prospects, but they need to hit first. The chances of them hitting are probably not super high, but you got a lot of traits in this group that could potentially hit.
Yeah, I do see this group as that. I see there's a lot of there's many more names in this year's class, relative to last year, as we do a lot in this industry, in the draft community. It's comparing it to last year's class. There's a lot more names that could be that if they hit. And obviously this year is going to be big for this position group, because right now maybe this is how I currently see it more so than how I project it forward, but I just really see it's Michael Mayer and the rest of them. I mean, Darnell Washington is another name we haven't mentioned yet, also at Georgia, who they don't build him like him, but he is battling some injuries going into the spring, and we'll see what that role looks like, with Brock Bowers, who's not even draft eligible, but is arguably the best tight end in football, in college football. Eric Gilbert's coming in that, tight end room. That Georgia tight end room is going to be really, really crowded. So Darnell Washington's another name. So I get what you're saying. There's a lot of receiving upside with this year's tight end class. I will say that.
Yeah, I just feel like last year it was like people were trying to bank on like the Jeremy Ruckerts of the world, where it's just like, guys, like, when are we going to ship sail from that one, right? Because he's just been the same guy for 3 years. But we saw, for me, and we talked about this a lot yesterday on the show, Alex, it's like Cameron Latu had just had in his first year playing tight end full-time over 400 yards on a loaded Alabama offense. Like, he could be a dude potentially. I think that you're talking about guys like Josh Wiley, if he's able to fill out his frame for Cincinnati, could be a dude. Jahleel Billingsley was a guy that we both liked who fell out of favor at Alabama. Maybe he gets back in good graces at the University of Texas under Sark. Benjamin Urasek, I think, is a guy that a lot of people need to kind of keep an eye on from Stanford. I think there's just younger guys, maybe, is why have more hope for the projection, because last year, again, you were going into the year like the developmental pieces were like fourth-year senior. What's his name from Ohio State? I just said his name. Jeremy Ruckert. It's like, why are we depending on a senior to break out? This year, we're thinking about juniors, redshirt juniors, guys that haven't played a ton of football, like a Cameron Latu. Like, those are the guys that you're kind of depending on taking the next step. So I think projection is maybe just more prevalent in this class than last year.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's get to talking about some of those names that we really like. Before we do, though, folks, I just want to tell you about today's sponsor, BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA and NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. Super easy to get started, so head to their website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So if you listened to yesterday's episode, this should not be surprising that I'm going to say the guy I'm really high on, the guy that I really, really like in this class is Jahleel Billingsley, the former Alabama tight end, now going to be should be Texas's starting tight end. And what I got from him watching him, I saw a fantastic athlete, very rare athleticism for the position. Understandably, this is a guy who a little bit of an undersized player in terms of his weight, but he's got the length that you want, and he's got the acceleration. I think that he's a shifty route runner. He finds space effectively, and when he's in space, he's got the movement capabilities to make guys miss. I loved everything that he did. The only thing that gets muddled is how does he work with coaching staffs? Now, I really do believe, and this is just speculation. I said this on the other show. I think the circumstance of him struggling last year and the disagreements that he was having with the Alabama coaching staff and the fact that there were rumors he wasn't showing up on time and he wasn't putting in enough effort in practice. Those are the things that you got about him. To be pushed in a diminished role in an offense that is not built to use a tight end like him. It was a pro-style offense that favored Cam Latu, who stepped up, who we're going to talk about in a second. I really think that if you put him back with Steve Sarkisian, who's going to run more of a spread style scheme, it will unlock him as a player. And I know that it's easy to say that there's all of these added pieces to that Texas receiving room, but if you take into account that they're probably going to be focusing their attention on covering those guys, a tight end like Jahleel Billingsley is going to be open often, and he's going to get a lot of targets, hopefully. And I really do believe he is going to have a strong year this season.
Jahleel, don't break my heart 2 years in a row, man. I've been a fan. If you're looking for a player that you can get super creative with, I think of it's not a one-for-one comparison, but like this is like the Deebo Samuel of tight ends, right? Like he can do so many different things for your offense. He can line up in the slot. He can line up out wide. He can do some things in line to a degree. He can do jet sweeps, which he's done in the past. He's returned kicks. This guy's an exceptional athlete. It's never been a question of talent. He got into the doghouse last year. What is behind that is going to be a conversation piece. But, man, I hope he puts it together because he is definitely a rare athlete for the position from a flexibility and quickness perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely looking at Jahleel Billingsley, if you're projecting him forward, as that move chess piece. He's not going to be your traditional tight end. We all knew this going into last year, Ryan. As you mentioned, you and I were both high on Billingsley coming through, last year's class. Of course, everything happened the way it did, and now he's at Texas, where the room's crowded at Texas as far as there are playmakers everywhere. So I think is Texas back? This is the year to prove it, because they have dudes everywhere. They have dudes everywhere on that offense. So I think I think Billingsley, from a production standpoint this year, might disappoint relative to his level of talent, but I'm not looking forward to him, having 600 plus yards. I just don't think that's going to be him this year. There's just too many mouths to feed in that offense. But his translation to the next level is he can be a playmaker in an NFL offense. So I've been big on Billingsley. Off the field, there's going to be some question marks going into the draft cycle next year, but this is a guy that has really, really good athleticism for his size. If you want to call him a big receiver, call him a big receiver. Maybe that's just what he is. I know he's listed as tight end in this, discussion, and that's what he's listed at on the roster, but he really is just a big receiver. You're not going to rely on this dude in the run game as an inline block or anything like that. This guy's going to be split out wide. He's going to stretch the field vertically as a big body target, and I think he can be really, really good for a creative offense. I know we talk about that all the time on both sides of the football. When you have these players that are kind of oddly sized and oddly athletic for their position, you need a creative offensive mind to really unlock his potential. But that's really what he's going to need at the next level. Someone that's going to orchestrate touches for him in space and utilize that size down the football field with his athleticism. But I'm big on Billingsley. I'm going to hold back. I didn't want to put him down for this one because of him burning me from last summer, but I like the pick.
Yeah. No, Joe, you're a smart man. I've rubbed off on you well. Good job, sir.
Shut up. Alex, your guy, we also talked about yesterday. If I have that correct. Yes, we talked about him yesterday. And he is additionally a very fun player. And we paired him with Billingsley because of the fact that they're both slot tight ends. So why did you pick him in this circumstance?
Yeah, I know I'm going to be oddly high on him. Jahim Bell, as we see the tight end position getting lighter, not Jahleel Billingsley light, but it's getting lighter. There's really only a couple of players to reference when you're talking about Jahim Bell's size. The first couple that came to mind were Evan Ingram, who was historically light for the position when he came out as a first rounder, and then Jordan Reed, who also light for the position, similar size profile.
Had also said Delaney Walker was the other one.
I had another one. I said Delaney Walker, Alex.
Delaney Walker, that's a good one. I was thinking of, more current, but Delaney Walker's another one. Mm-hmm. Look, this size profile has worked in the NFL. Evan Ingram, yes, disappointment relative to expectations, but he's been a starter for his young career to this point, and maybe just the change of scenery to Jacksonville this year is what he needs. But it's worked. You've gotten relatively good, production out of this size profile. So I'm not as concerned with the size profile because I think he's fine as a run blocker for his size. I think he's fine. But this guy's athleticism's next level. I mean, Jahleel Billingsley, yeah, we talked about him. He's basically a big wide receiver with his athleticism. But Jahim Bell is fun to watch. I watched that bowl game, and I know the North Carolina game was his breakout game and is what's transcended him into first-round consideration for some. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, not first round. But that is the one game that I've watched of this tight end class where I got out of my seat. Like, this guy just makes plays, and his ability to get the big play ability that this guy has is just something that not many guys in this year's class have. I mean, we're going to talk about Michael Mayer. Of course, he's great. He's like a streamline. Every play you're going to get good production from him, but I don't think he has the big play ability Jahim Bell does. And I think this guy could be special athletically, but he still meets that size threshold to at least be an every down player. Whereas I feel like I'm missing that with someone like Billingsley.
The only thing with Jahim Bell, and I agree, like, I really like him. He's very unique. And the fact that in that North Carolina game, they used him as a running back often was exciting to see because he's an H-back. That's what his role is going to be. The only thing, and we talked about this on the show, that deters me from getting on like any day two hype is I think there's a limited amount of teams that are willing to invest in a player like this because a lot of other teams are not creative enough to use a tight end of this profile. I think you need to be on, and what Ryan said was like a Kyle Juszczyk type role, something like that. If you put him in a situation like that where you're moving him around, you're putting him in advantageous matchups. But I think some of these old school approach teams are just going to have no interest in him.
But I think personally, your point about there only being, a limited number of teams that can unlock his full potential with his frame and his play style and athleticism, I think is that could be the reason he's a day 2 pick. We see year in and year out, there's players that are unique for their position, but they only fit a handful of teams. But in those handful of offensive systems, they're going to be transcendent. We see that with certain players at their position. And I think Jahim Bell in this case can be transcendent for an offense that can utilize and unlock his full potential. And I think that's what could propel him into day 2 consideration. Not the fact that not all 30 teams are going to be interesting. All 32 teams are going to be interested in him. And that's true. Not all 32 teams are going to be in on Jahim Bell because they don't meet their size profile for what they like at the position. But it only takes one. That's the NFL draft. And I think there are a handful of teams in the NFL that can use someone like Jahim Bell with his athleticism as a big slot, as a flex tight end, that moves around the formation. I think this guy is gonna, and if he continues to ascend the way he has and the way he finished last year, especially with that bowl game against North Carolina we keep mentioning, Jahim Bell is going to be a day 2 pick, I think.
It's possible. I think that it's, and we talked about this yesterday, Joe just kind of mentioned a little bit, but like, I think a West Coast heavy team that is going to utilize the yak influence of Jaheim Bell, I think that's where his projection really lies. I just looked up Delaney Walker's combine testing. So he was out of Central Missouri. Joe, I told you he was short, 6'1" and a quarter. Yeah. He was a short dude, man. He was not tall. He was 240. Jaheim's 230. So I think they'll cut the difference there. He ran 4.55 in the 40 and a 36.5-inch vert. So I think Jaheim could be roughly in that ballpark, right? Like 4.55 doesn't seem unrealistic in my opinion. So we'll see. Yeah, I think that he's a I don't want to call him dependent. He's a different type of dude that is going to take some creativity, but there's certainly upside as a pass receiver. There's no doubt. Am I up now?
Yes. So the last guy, though, that we're going to get to, Cam Latu was your pick, as I alluded to earlier.
Yep.
We're also fans of Cam Latu. And you mentioned how he is so new to the position. This is a former linebacker. And I said this on the show when we talked about him. The dude plays tight end like a linebacker, but let's hear a little bit more why you like him so much.
Well, I mean, I think that is exactly why I like him, is the fact that he has a physicality to him, to the position. I mean, he was a defensive end linebacker recruit, played 3-4 outside linebackers first year at Alabama, and then transitioned. And obviously last year was his first full-time as a tight end in a expanded role. He had over 400 yards receiving. I mean, this kid is a long 6'5", 240 something, around 250 pounds, athletic kid who can do some of the yak stuff. Cause Alex, we were looking it up. He actually tested at the pro day from last year for Alabama. He was one of the juniors that was able to test, and he ran 4.62 at 250 pounds, right? So, like, he can move, man, in a straight line. I mean, the kid's explosive. He can break some tackles. He's got physicality in the run game. I want to see an expanded role as far as his route diversity, because right now all I'm seeing is flat routes and tight end leaks and some easy stuff where he's kind of has some separation to him. I want to see more working in traffic and playing through contact and doing all that type of stuff. But I think there's upside there, man. Like, if you told me that he is the 3rd to 4th tight end off the board when it's all said and done, I'd believe it. I would. But right now, we're working off a guy that only has 1 year of production, right? And that's my step back for a second. I want to see him take the next step because, I mean, Alabama literally just drew me into this trap last year. Jahleel Billingsley had half a year of production. I'm like, cool, I can see that now in an expanded role. And then he took a step back for different reasons than, just not playing well. But I have to see Cameron Latu play well for another year before I fully hop on the train. But that could hurt him. That could hinder him a little bit. That could make me too high right now. But I think the talent is all there for him to be a starting caliber tight end at the next level.
Yeah, the thing when, and I know y'all both like Cameron Latu, and I do too. I thought I didn't know if y'all were going to be on board. I didn't listen to yesterday's episode quite yet.
Dang.
But I know, not yet. I usually listen, but usually it comes the weekend. But Cameron Latu for me is someone I thought I was going to be high on. So I'm glad to hear y'all are in the same boat, because first thing that popped out when I watched him was, man, I like this guy's frame. Like, he has that prototypical tight end frame that you like, and then I didn't really see too many lapses in his game. As a blocker, I saw Obviously, of course, there's some times where you wish he stuck on a guy a little bit better in the run game, but I didn't see any, inhibitant to do so. Like I didn't see anything that inhibits him from being a good blocker. And then, like you said, as an athlete, that really stood out. And along the red zone where you really want to see your tight ends thrive in the passing game, especially, he did that. Like he was getting jump balls in the red zone, and I really like Cameron Latu. I'm interested to see. Coming off last year where there was a lot of focus on that tight end room with all the noise around Jahleel Billingsley and the situation between him and the coaching staff, I'm really excited to see a quiet tight end like a quiet room where Cameron Latu doesn't really have too much pressure to prove to be the guy. He's going to be the guy going into this year, and bringing back Bryce Young with Bryce Young losing his two main receiving threats. I think Cameron Latu is poised for a breakout year as far as his production. On the offense side of the football. And like you said, Ryan, I think you're talking top 3, top 4 tight end, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I think an expanded role for him is certainly likely. As you mentioned, you're losing multiple running backs, you're losing multiple receivers. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be, a big added juice to the offense. I wouldn't be surprised if this offense has more of a run-first approach this upcoming season. We know that Bill O'Brien loves running backs. We know that he loves this pro-style scheme and using tight ends. I think Cam Latu is perfect for what they're looking for, and that physicality that you referenced, Ryan, is exciting. He has to be, I think, one of the most exciting projection-based players outside of Eric Gilbert. Eric Gilbert is really, really exciting, but we don't even know how he's going to even fit or if he finishes the season, if he plays a full year. There are a lot of variables that we can't predict. But what we do know, Cam Latu is new to the position. He's a really, really good athlete, and he showed signs of only playing a limited amount of games at the position of looking really, really good. So that's why I'm super high on Cam Latu, and I think a lot of people should be. Him being the third tight end off the board, I am putting my stamp on that. I would fully support that being a possibility, or at least in the top 5 of the position group.
Yeah, I think he is the big projection guy along with Eric Gilbert, right? Like Gilbert has special traits, but I mean, Eric Gilbert's one bad day away from being a defensive tackle again, right? So you never know, man.
Offensive tackle.
He'd be a good offensive tackle. Go ahead.
All right, let's talk about guys that we're not super high on. So this category are players that the consensus really likes, but we're just not really there and we don't understand it. And last cycle, people were high on Austin Stogner, and he has a pretty weak season. Maybe part of that was Spencer Rattler being taken out of the equation, and Caleb Williams wasn't on good terms with Austin Stogner. Maybe that's what it was, but he's now going to South Carolina. He's got another opportunity to prove himself. Him being back with his boy Spencer Rattler clearly influenced his decision to transfer to South Carolina. Does this mean he has a better year? I think outside of those variables, I wasn't really excited watching him. It's similar to the issues that we have with Charlie Kohler last season, where a bit of a lumbering athlete, not really going to kill you with his athleticism, big, long kid. He's a really, really nice player in terms of making catches and contested catches. That's the value. This is a red zone tight end, but you can't sell me on a guy who's not a good blocker, very, very underwhelming blocker at that as well. And all he's really going to provide is contested catches and a red zone threat. This is a second or a third tight end on a roster, and that's the most I'm really getting from Austin Stogner.
I agree, which is why I put him first. Then Joe started crying that he wanted to use Austin
you
Stogner.
Showed up late, and I was trying to formulate who else I could pick instead of picking all the guys that we already talked about this week, but I decided I wanted Stogner because I've watched more of him than the guy that you picked, and I wanted to talk about the guy that you picked, but go ahead.
Yeah, whatever, man, whatever. Yeah, so here's the story, okay? I picked Austin Stogner. Joe's like, I wanted Austin Stogner. Please
shut
give me
up,
Austin Stogner. And then
here's the story. Ryan showed up 15 minutes late.
So then I picked Alex's guy, and then Alex is like, no, I want that guy, right? So then I had to pick my third option on the list, which is still a good option in my opinion, because I was very underwhelmed by him last year. It was Will Mallory from Miami. Sorry, Miami fans. I'm lower on some Miami guys this year. Sorry, man. I think Tyler Van Dyke was my lower on guy for quarterback game, right? Too
2 for 4.
You're gonna hate Zion Johnson too, or no, wait, not Zion Johnson. Who's the
Zion Nelson?
Zion Nelson. Oh no, I actually like Zion Nelson, but that's a different one. So, all right, man, I'm gonna put it like this: I blame Brevin Jordan for this one. Good friend of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospect podcast, Brevin Jordan. Okay,
Very, very good friend for
Yeah.
indirect reason.
Oh man, I like Brevin, by the way, and Brevin actually had some decent production as a rookie, which I didn't really see. But yeah, I actually did like Brevin. But when I interviewed Brevin coming into the 2020 cycle, was that 2020 now? 2021, 2021 cycle. Sorry. He told me that Will Mallory was going to be tight end 1 in the 2022 cycle. We're here now in the 2023 cycle, and I'm here to tell you, Brevin, not a great call on your part, my friend. Not a great call. Because then I looked up his thing, and I think Brevin actually mentioned this in the interview. In the state of Florida, which is a talent-rich state coming out of high school, he was a state champion in the 110 high hurdles, which tells me there's a little flexibility there and there's a little speed there, right? That tells me that. I don't see either one on film. I don't see either one, man.
Maybe the competition he was going against was a little
Florida?
suspect.
In Florida?
Maybe they were all injured. Maybe he was going against the JV team.
I don't know, man. All I know is I don't see a great athlete on film with Will Mallory. I see okay blocking chops at times. Like I think he has some decent flashes there. I think he's got a pretty big catch radius. His hands are fine. But I just don't see a great athlete. I really don't. I don't see flexibility. Straight line, I'm just like, he's fine. He's nothing special. I don't get that one. I don't get that one too much. Sorry, Hurricane fans. I have a lot of Hurricane fans that follow me, and I love them dearly, but not a great call on your parts, friends.
Yeah,
Mallory.
go ahead. Mallory. Go ahead, yeah, I was gonna say Mallory's someone I didn't watch this cycle because I watched him last summer, as I think you mentioned, Ryan, and I didn't feel the need to watch Will Mallory again. I kind of got what I needed last year. Like, it wasn't one of those situations. Sometimes you watch a player, say last summer, and you see the athlete, you just hadn't seen him put it all together. That's a player I'll watch again this summer. Just to see like if they made the technical growth that would make them, a higher coveted prospect. Will Mallory, it wasn't really that. It's just I didn't love his athleticism. Like you said, Ryan, I didn't love too much about his game, and I didn't think there was like it was like a lack of nuance. It wasn't like he just needed more reps to get more affiliated with position. Like Will Mallory just to me felt like he is what he is kind of player. And I didn't see too much more potential to unlock there. So he wasn't prioritized for me to watch again this summer. He really is, unfortunately, despite some hype from NFL great tight end Brevin Jordan. He is just a guy. He's just a guy at the collegiate level. I don't think this is going to be if anything, this is a late day 3 kind of tight end.
Yeah. I only watched half of a game on him, and I was bored. That's all. I was like, this is bored. I even flipped on highlights of him, and I'm like, these are the most boring tight end highlights I've ever seen. And I'm like, I can't get it. I almost put him down. I was like, I don't think it'd be fair to put it down a guy I only watched half a game on, but I'm glad that Ryan brought him up because, again, I was very, very bored.
Joe, are we doing good on time?
No, we're not doing good on time. Alex,
can I? Oh, I'm sorry. Alex has one more guy, and then can I end the show with something before?
Go for it. Yes,
go Alex.
Alex, I have plenty of time. I don't know.
I don't want to talk about Alex's player. That's why. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, for good reason. Simply put, we talked. It was either last week's show or the week before that we had. We talked about how certain teams and certain positions, players just get boosted up the board. And this school, Iowa, I'm just going to say, is one that produces a lot of tight ends. And I think Sam LaPorta is someone that has been boosted up, watch lists and too early rankings simply because he's an Iowa tight end that's been a mainstay for a couple years. He's been in that offense since 2019, putting up decent production. He has decent size to him. And because he goes to University of Iowa and fits those monikers, he is going to be boosted up draft boards. And this is someone that's just not exciting. Talk about getting bored watching football. It's hard to do, but when you watch Iowa's offense and you're watching specifically Sam LaPorta, there's not a lot of fun to watch there. I just wanted to say Sam LaPorta because simply put, there are some schools and some positions at certain schools that are naturally gonna get a boost in people prioritizing watching them, and they're gonna get boosted up draft boards and stuff like that. In this case, Iowa's tight end just not that good. Noah Fant,
Yeah.
TJ Hawkinson, there are certain prospects that have come out of that system and been really, really good in the NFL. George Kittle, of course. Sam LaPorta is not going to be one of them.
He's so boring of a prospect that Ryan looks bored having to talk about him. So I haven't watched him. So
Well,
Ryan, I'm curious your thoughts.
He had a really nice year last year, 53 catches, 670 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he's coming from, like Alex said, a little bit of a pipeline in Iowa. I think he's this year's Jeremy Ruckert. Like, I think that there's nothing exciting about him. I think he's solid. He's okay. And I think that the NFL is going to value him more than they probably should. Like, that's what I think Sam LaPorta is. I think in a similar vein, Joe, than what we were just talking about with like an Austin Stogner, I think LaPorta is better than Stogner, but I also think LaPorta is a second tight end at the next level. You disagree with that, Alex?
I'm still pro Stogner over LaPorta. I think there's more receiving upside there with Stogner. As a blocker, you're not getting really much out of either of them. You might get a little bit more out of LaPorta, but both of them are not anything to hold your hat on. But I like Stogner's contested catchability over something like LaPorta's.
That's fair. That's fair. I would just say, LaPorta for me
and similar
is going to be a good number 2 tight ends at the next level. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like this kid's going to get drafted on day 2 because of some certain factors. And he'll
be Drew Tammy.
Drew Tammy.
Who? Who's Drew Tammy?
Exactly.
Jacob Tammy, you mean?
Jacob Tammy. Shoot.
Man, we're struggling today with remembering.
Well, exactly. I can't even remember his name.
I thought of Alex a little bit with him, and I think this guy's a little better of a player than he's going to be. But I thought of Dennis Pitta. You remember Dennis Pitta?
Yeah,
he was really solid, nothing splashy.
But Pitta was supposed to be really good, and then he just kept getting hurt.
Yeah, he was solid though. I kind of feel that way about LaPorta. I feel like he's just going to not be a flashy guy. He's going to get the job done, but I think his upside is probably a low end tight end 1, but most likely a tight end 2. That's just what I see at the next level.
All right, Ryan, what did you want to close this out with here?
We didn't get a chance to talk about a couple tight ends that I liked this week, man. So I just wanted to throw a couple quick shout outs if I can. Okay. Is that all right?
Yes, that's allowed.
Zach Kuntz, tight end out of Old Dominion, Joe, was a former number 1 tight end recruit coming out at Penn State. Came in the same class as Pat Freiermuth, had some injuries. Pat Freiermuth took the mantle as the number 1 tight end. Most people don't know, though, Pat Freiermuth was the second-ranked tight end in that class for Penn State, just Penn State in general, right? So Kuntz has battled some injuries, hasn't had a ton of playing time, transferred to Old Dominion. My guy had 80-something catches last year, man.
Wow.
It was 70-something. It was a crazy number last year, and he's massive. He's 6'8", 260, right? And I think that he is a player that needs to be talked about because I think he has a decent amount of upside in this class, and he was a track guy, I think, in high school. So this kid may literally at 6'8", 260 run 4.68, 4.7 flat.
Wow.
He might be that type of dude. So yeah, I want to throw out Zach Kuntz. And the last guy, one of my favorite watches so far, and I wanted to include him. He just didn't fit any of the criteria that we had as far as the matchups or, lower or higher. Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State is a really good football player, man. We had an interview with him, 6'5", 255 pounds. Physical dude. He's a poor man's Michael Mayer in this class. Not as good at Mayer in any of these attributes, but one of the better all-around tight ends in this class. Straight line guy, physical, great catch radius, great hands. I like Tucker Kraft a ton.
I love Tucker Kraft too. I think very, very balanced. Definitely not a first-round pick right now, but I would argue he has all those traits, and there's a reason why he was getting offered that NIL money that he was being thrown at him to go to a Power 5 school. Part of me wonders, does he have a higher draft projection at a bigger school? But he is good enough to be the next Dallas Goedert to come out of this program. Heck, if he has a big year this year and he looks improved, I wouldn't put it past him being a day 2 pick. That dude is so freaking underrated. He is so good. Alex,
can I mention one guy?
Yeah, you're allowed to have one guy. Go for it.
Sorry. Kind of like Marshawn Ford from Louisville. Marshawn Ford, Louisville, short. He's going to be short.
How short is he?
It was hard to find him on the all-22 because he doesn't really stand out versus the wide receivers as far as his size goes. But you might be looking at the best route runner out of this tight end class.
He's listed at
Guy-
6'2", Joe. So you
Yeah,
do the math.
6 foot and a half.
short. He's short.
He might
He's
be,
also
man.
not like he's not huge either, but he's someone that moved around. You didn't talk about a chess piece, moved around the formation for Louisville. He was asked to run a very diverse route tree for his position at the collegiate level. Had fun watching him. A lot more fun than Sam LaPorta.
Folks, that's going to have to wrap us up on at Joe DeLeone, at Ryan Roberts, at Alex Gilstrap, at NFL Pro, at Rise and Draft. Sorry. Go follow at Ryan Roberts, though, too. I don't know who the hell that is. At NFL Prospects Pod, Hack City on YouTube, and then subscribe